I continue to think that we are partners and competitors with a lot of these larger social networks because we do this one simple thing, and more than anything else, we're this open system. A ton of our updates come from Facebook, and I think vice versa. I'm not sure, but you know, so in one way it was a validation. In another way, it was like, holy crap, this is going to be even bigger than we thought if these guys are doing it too. So I think it's good. I think it moves everything forward quicker.
Two more questions?
Yeah. One here on, I'd like to talk a little bit about the developer community.
Yeah.
And how you see that growing and evolving. There's a whole ecosystem around companies that are actually monetizing around Twitter. And one person asked a question about how you feel about a company moving and monetizing your product before you guys have. Also, just about the tools. That's always a great question in terms of what tools do you use.
Oh, right.
And
yeah.
What are some of the top tools you see coming from the community?
Well, to answer the first part, we think it's awesome that there are companies that are making money on Twitter and applications that are charging or figuring out innovative ways to make a profit using Twitter, because, like I said, that nourishes the ecosystem, that encourages more people and encourages more innovation, and it just grows it, and that's one of the reasons why we've been so successful, is because we've said, we don't know what's going to happen, go crazy, and the twit pics, and everyone comes along and suddenly you're sharing pictures over Twitter, and so I think when these companies say, like, we raised money, or we're making money, or we just got acquired, and they're all built on Twitter, then I think it adds value to the overall ecosystem, which is great. To answer the other question, I'm pretty old school. I still use SMS, and I still use the web, but I really enjoy using Tweety, which is because I have an iPhone, and I also use something called Summizer, which just looks at trends. It's like the perfect application for waiting in line at the grocery store, because you're like, what's trending right now? David Carradine, what happened? Oh, geez. So those are some two things that actually, I don't even know. I know there are all these applications, but we don't do a very good job of showing people them. You can go to the Twitter fan wiki, which someone created, which has a pretty good list of them. But you'd think that we'd have a list of them somewhere, or you'd think that we would at least say, like, oh, it looks like you have a BlackBerry. Do you know that there are BlackBerry applications? And
why don't you do that?
We just haven't gotten to it. The API team, for the longest time, the API team was nobody. It was just one engineer working in his free time when he wasn't working on, like, web features, trying to support the API. Now we have 3 people on the API team, and we want to grow that team more. The documentation is only in English, but there are people around the world that would love to be building Twitter apps. So we want to grow that part out significantly in the next year or so.
Do you see yourself acquiring any of the apps that become?
Yeah, we have already. I mean, we acquired this search application called Summize, which basically all we had built was one simple thing early on, which allowed people to and you could follow any other account on Twitter, but we created this thing over SMS, and that allows you to follow any keyword. So any update that contains that keyword would get delivered to you, even if you didn't follow the person. So you could just get information about Macworld or the color yellow or whatever the heck you wanted. But that's as far as we got. And these guys at Summize built this entirely robust, beautiful search service for tweets. And so we met with them here in New York. Well, they're not New York based. They're actually Virginia based. We met with them in New York because that was like common neutral ground, and they were awesome. I remember meeting them after about like 10 minutes. Kind of leaned over to Ev, and I was like, "Oh my God, these guys are really smart. Like, we might be the jerks." Like, we were supposed to be evaluating them, and I was like, "Oh my God, say something smart." They were great. They were, not only did they bring this wonderful service to Twitter, they brought like such expertise and they were such a great culture fit. So I think we would consider doing something like that again. But it has to be like the people have to be awesome. It has to be so perfect. perfectly matched to Twitter. Even if there's an application that looks perfect for Twitter, it has to be more about bringing the people into the family than about the application, I think, because of our strong focus on culture. But we would definitely, if we saw something that that we wanted to be part of Twitter, we would definitely meet with the folks and see if they wanted to become part of Twitter.
So 5 more minutes. Any more questions in New York? Steph,
I can do this all day.
Shoot away.
There's a question here about Air France and the hundreds of tweets per minute. Is there any way of structuring the info flow on Twitter? And then I would also tie that to, with the trending topics, I mean, you've seen lately trends really become much more entertainment focused, I suppose.
When American Idol comes on.
Tell, lies girls tell, 3 words after sex, all these kind of like hashtags that are popping up that are, I don't know, I don't find all that interesting.
Yeah, well, trends are super rudimentary. I mean, I think it's arguable whether or not we should even put them in, or if we should have put a huge beta tag on them or something, because they're super simple and rudimentary. But we thought they were interesting enough that we would put them in. To answer your other question,
They have changed.
yeah, we're trying to work on them. But to answer your other question, right now, when you do you were talking about Twitter search, right? When you do a Twitter search, the results are just whatever the newest tweet is. But that's not always the most important tweet. And so when you talk about something like Air France, or when the plane landed in the Hudson, which is a much nicer story, you're like, what? Maybe you hear an hour later, like, what? The plane landed in the Hudson. So you go to Twitter and you say, like, plane Hudson, and you just get all these, like, people retweeting or saying, like, oh my God, I can't believe it, I can't believe it. But what you really want is that picture that the guy took of the plane and shared on Twitter. That's the one you want to see, that one. So that speaks to, like, okay, real time, newest first is really interesting, but there might be other ways of displaying the data that could be more relevant. And I think we'll learn along with the folks who use Twitter how best to deal with that. Right now, there's still a ton of value in just being fast, But like you said, you need it with these really popular topics. Sometimes it gets overwhelming, and you need to figure out a better way. So we're working on it.
Is there any hurdles for Twitter that keep you up at night?
Smooth running, no hurdles. Make a call, everything happens. We're not having as many sleepless nights as we were when we couldn't keep the service running effectively, and it was really just amazing. It felt silly at the office, but it was like we were like, hey, when the service works, more people use it. Like why? Like I remember when we first started getting a hold of things, we do the weekly meetup, and Jason Goldman, our director of product, he showed these numbers, and we were like, saw these off the charts growth, and we're like, what happened? He's like, the site worked this week. And we were like, we didn't do anything special. No, you just kept it working. And like, oh wow, we should do that more often. But now I think the hurdles. So scaling is always going to be an issue from a technical perspective, and it's constantly revisited because you get to new plateaus of challenges. But I think the word is interesting because we're also trying to scale a company and grow a company, and I think that's an interesting challenge and something that you have to focus on. Like I said earlier about the child actor kind of problem. So I think that is something we're always thinking about too, because you hear about these big companies where they're like, oh, I used to like working at this company, it was cool, but now there's like, 10,000 people here, and I don't really want to work there anymore. I want to go work at some cool startup. And so we're like, wait a minute, are we going to grow into the big company that people want to leave? And so we have to think about how we approach that. And so that's something that we've been focusing some time on. And then, we're just understaffed. We don't have enough operations people, and we don't have enough systems engineers to be doing what we need to do. I mean, what they've done with what they've got has been amazing. But hiring and hiring in an effective way where people aren't just thrown into the tank, but brought on board and properly trained and feel like they're part of the family and all that stuff. Those are kind of the tricky stuff where we haven't been before, and we're trying to learn from the best.